January 8, 1977. It was Elvis Presley's 42nd birthday, and Graceland had never felt more like a tomb. The king of rock and roll sat alone in his master bedroom, staring out at the Memphis skyline, while the mansion that usually buzzed with activity remained eerily quiet. There were no party decorations, no celebration planned, no crowd of well-wishers. Just Elvis, his pain medication, and the crushing weight of knowing that something was terribly wrong with his life. What happened at 3:47 p.m. that afternoon would give Elvis one final moment of pure joy before he left this world 7 months later. But the person who walked through Graceland's gates that day carried with them a secret that would reveal the most heartbreaking truth about Elvis's final months. The man who changed everything was someone Elvis hadn't seen in over 20 years, his childhood friend from Tupelo, Mississippi, Billy Ray Tompkins. Billy Ray had grown up 3 houses down from Elvis on East Tupelo's old Saltillo Road. Back when both boys were so poor, they shared hand-me-down clothes and dreamed of escaping their circumstances through music. Elvis had been having one of his worst days in months. His health was deteriorating rapidly, his relationship with his father Vernon was strained, and the isolation of fame had become so complete that he rarely left Graceland anymore. The prescription drugs that were supposed to help had instead created a fog that made each day blend into the next. On this particular birthday, Elvis had dismissed most of his staff, wanting to be alone. He had spent the morning looking through old photo albums, trying to remember what it felt like to be happy. The photos showed a heartbreaking progression from the vibrant young man who'd conquered the world to the exhausted figure he saw in recent pictures. Around noon, Elvis had attempted to play piano in the music room, but his fingers felt heavy and uncooperative. The songs that once flowed effortlessly now seemed like distant memories from someone else's life. He'd given up after 20 minutes and returned to his bedroom, where he sat by the window, watching the January clouds roll across the Tennessee sky. When the intercom buzzed at 3:47 p.m., Elvis almost didn't answer it. The security guard at the front gate sounded uncertain. "Elvis, there's a man here says he's Billy Ray Tompkins from Tupelo. Says he knew you when you were kids. Should I send him away?" Elvis's heart stopped. Billy Ray Tompkins. The name transported him instantly back to 1946, to a time when they were both 11 years old, sharing dreams under the Mississippi stars, playing guitar on the front porch of the Presley family's shotgun house, talking about becoming musicians and seeing the world. "Send him up," Elvis said quietly. 20 minutes later, Elvis heard footsteps in the hallway outside his bedroom. When the door opened, time seemed to collapse. Billy Ray had aged, of course. His hair was gray now, and his face showed the lines of a man who'd worked hard his entire life. But his eyes were the same kind, intelligent eyes that Elvis remembered from their childhood. "Hello, Elvis," Billy Ray said simply. "Happy birthday, old friend." Elvis stood up slowly, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Billy Ray, I can't believe you're here. Why did you? "Because it's your birthday," Billy Ray replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "And because I figured you might need a friend today." For the first time in months, Elvis smiled genuinely. "How did you know?" Billy Ray pulled a newspaper clipping from his jacket pocket. It was a recent article about Elvis's declining health and increasingly erratic behavior, the kind of gossip piece that had become common in the tabloid press. "I've been reading about you, Elvis, and I know you well enough to recognize when you're hurting." Elvis sat back down heavily, the brief moment of joy fading. "I don't know what's happening to me, Billy Ray. I wake up every morning and I don't know who I am anymore. I look in the mirror and I see this stranger wearing my face." Billy Ray walked to the window and looked out at the grounds of Graceland. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see the same boy who used to sit on his mama's porch, playing that old guitar and singing like his life depended on it. That boy is dead," Elvis said bitterly. "He died somewhere along the way, buried under all this fame and money and expectation." "No, he's not," Billy Ray said firmly. "He's just lost. And sometimes when we're lost, we need someone to remind us of who we used to be." Billy Ray reached into a worn leather satchel he'd been carrying and pulled out something that made Elvis gasp. It was a photograph, faded with age, showing 2 young boys sitting on a front porch. One boy was holding a guitar while the other leaned in close, both of them grinning at the camera with the unself-conscious joy of childhood. Your mama gave this to my mama in 1954, right after you signed with Sun Records, Billy Ray said, handing Elvis the photograph. She said she wanted someone to remember who Elvis was before he became Elvis Presley. Elvis took the photograph with trembling hands, staring at the image of his younger self. The boy in the picture looked so hopeful, so alive, so certain that the world was full of possibilities. I barely remember being that happy, he whispered. I remember, Billy Ray said. I remember the day you got your first guitar for your birthday when you turned 11. You played it until your fingers bled, and even then you didn't want to stop. You said music was the only thing that made sense in the world. Elvis looked up at his old friend with tears in his eyes. What happened to me, Billy Ray? How did I get so far away from that boy? Billy Ray sat down in the chair across from Elvis, his expression gentle but serious. You got everything you ever dreamed of, and then you discovered that everything wasn't enough. But that doesn't mean the boy who loved music is gone. It just means you forgot how to find him. I don't know how to find him anymore, Elvis admitted. I don't know how to feel anything real anymore. The pills help with the pain, but they make everything else fuzzy. Nothing feels real. Then let's do something real, Billy Ray said. Something that boy would have done. Billy Ray reached into his satchel again and pulled out an old harmonica, dented and tarnished with age. This was your daddy's. He gave it to my daddy when your family moved away from Tupelo. My daddy gave it to me before he died, told me to return it to you someday. Elvis stared at the harmonica in wonder. He remembered his father playing it on quiet evenings, filling their small house with simple melodies that made their poverty seem less important. Vernon had given up music when the responsibilities of family became overwhelming, but for a brief time, he had shared his son's love of musical expression. I haven't seen this in 30 years, Elvis said, taking the harmonica reverently. Your daddy was a good man, Elvis. Maybe not perfect, but good. And he passed something important on to you. The understanding that music isn't about being famous or making money. It's about expressing something true. Elvis lifted the harmonica to his lips and blew a soft note. The sound was thin and wavering, nothing like the powerful voice that had made him famous, but it carried something his singing had lost. Innocence, simplicity, honesty. Billy Ray, I need to tell you something, Elvis said, setting the harmonica down carefully. I don't think I'm going to be around much longer. Billy Ray leaned forward, alarmed. What do you mean? I mean, I'm tired, Billy Ray. Bone deep, soul deep tired. I wake up every morning and I don't want to face another day of being Elvis Presley. The concerts, the movies, the constant performance. I feel like I'm disappearing inside my own life. Elvis, you're scaring me. Are you talking about... Billy Ray couldn't finish the sentence. I'm not talking about doing anything to hurt myself, Elvis said quickly, but I can feel something ending, like a part of me is already gone and the rest is just waiting to catch up. Billy Ray was quiet for a long moment, processing what his old friend had just shared. Elvis, do you remember what you used to say when we were kids? When things got bad at home, when your parents were fighting about money, when you felt like nothing would ever get better? Elvis shook his head. You used to say that music was your prayer, that when you sang you were talking directly to God, and God was listening. You said that as long as you could sing, you could survive anything. The memory hit Elvis like a physical blow. He had said those words, believed them completely, lived by them for years. Music had been his salvation, his escape, his connection to something larger than himself. But somewhere along the way, music had become a job, a performance, a product to be manufactured and sold. I don't know how to pray anymore, Billy Ray, Elvis said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to sing from my heart anymore. Everything I do feels fake, manufactured, designed to give people what they expect from Elvis Presley rather than what I actually feel. Then maybe it's time to stop being Elvis Presley for a while, Billy Ray suggested. Maybe it's time to remember how to be Elvis Aaron, the boy who sang because he had to, not because anyone was listening. Elvis looked at his old friend with something like hope in his eyes. How do I do that? By singing something that matters to you, something real, something that comes from the boy in that photograph, not from the man the world thinks it knows. Billy Ray stood up and walked to the door. I'm going to step outside for a few minutes. When I come back, I want you to sing me something, anything that feels true to who you are right now, in this moment, on your birthday, in this room where nobody else can hear you. Can you do that? Elvis nodded slowly. After Billy Ray left, Elvis sat alone with the photograph and the harmonica, trying to remember what it felt like to sing without thinking about how he sounded, without worrying about what anyone else would think. When Billy Ray returned 20 minutes later, he found Elvis sitting at the small piano in the corner of his bedroom, his hands resting on the keys. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Elvis looked more present, more alive than he had when Billy Ray had arrived. "I want to sing you something," Elvis said quietly. "It's not a song anyone's ever heard before. I wrote it just now, thinking about everything we've talked about." Elvis began to play, his fingers finding a simple melody that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep inside him. When he started singing, his voice was different, smaller than the powerful instrument that had filled concert halls, but more honest, more vulnerable, more real. The song was about childhood friendship, about losing yourself and trying to find your way back, about the weight of dreams fulfilled and the loneliness of success. It was about missing the simple joy of making music for the pure love of it, and about the fear that he might never feel that joy again. As Elvis sang, tears ran down his face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of recognition, of rediscovering something he thought he had lost forever. The boy in the photograph was still there, buried under layers of fame and expectation, but still alive, still capable of honest expression. When the song ended, Billy Ray was crying too. "That was beautiful, Elvis. That was real." "It felt real," Elvis said wonderingly. "For the first time in so long, it felt like me." "I want to ask you something," Billy Ray said, "and I want you to think about it carefully. Would you be willing to record that song? Not for an album, not for release, just to preserve it?" Elvis hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for that. What if it's not good enough? What if—" "It's not about being good enough for other people," Billy Ray interrupted gently. "It's about being honest enough for yourself. That song you just sang, that's your prayer, Elvis. That's you talking directly to God. And God is listening." Elvis looked at the photograph again, then at the harmonica, then at his old friend who had appeared on his birthday like an angel of mercy. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." Billy Ray had brought more than just memories with him to Graceland that day. He had brought a small portable recording device. For the next hour, Elvis recorded 3 songs, the one he had just written, "Love Me Tender," played on harmonica, and "Peace in the Valley," sung as a quiet prayer. The recordings were raw, unpolished, intimate in a way that Elvis's professional recordings hadn't been in years. They captured not the king of rock and roll, but Elvis Aaron Presley on his 42nd birthday, trying to remember who he was underneath the fame. When they finished, Elvis looked exhausted but peaceful. "Thank you, Billy Ray. I needed this more than I knew." "Happy birthday, old friend," Billy Ray said, embracing Elvis one final time. Billy Ray left Graceland that evening, taking with him the recordings and a promise from Elvis to call him if he ever needed to remember who he was. It was the last time the two friends would see each other alive. 7 months later, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. In the aftermath of his death, they found something on his bedside table: the faded photograph of 2 boys on a front porch and his father's old harmonica, carefully placed next to a handwritten note that read, "Billy Ray was right. The boy is still here. EAP, January 8, 1977. Billy Ray received a call 2 days after Elvis's funeral. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, had found Billy Ray's contact information in Elvis's personal effects and wanted to meet with him. When they met at Graceland, she asked him about his visit on Elvis's birthday. "He was different after you came," Priscilla said. "Still struggling, still in pain, but something had shifted. He talked about you, about childhood, about remembering who he used to be." "What did you say to him?" Billy Ray told her about their conversation, about the recordings they had made, about Elvis trying to reconnect with the joy he had once found in music. Priscilla listened with tears in her eyes. "I'd like to hear those recordings," she said finally. When Billy Ray played the recordings for Priscilla, she was stunned by their raw emotional power. These weren't the polished productions that had made Elvis famous. They were the honest expressions of a man trying to find his way back to himself. "The world needs to hear these someday," Priscilla said. "Not now, maybe not for years, but someday." They show a side of Elvis that people never got to see, the vulnerable, searching, deeply human side. The recordings remained private for decades, shared only with Elvis's closest family members. But in 2002, on what would have been Elvis's 67th birthday, Priscilla authorized their release as part of the Graceland Sessions, Elvis's Last Prayer. The response was overwhelming. Critics called the recordings some of the most emotionally powerful music Elvis had ever made. The recordings showed the world that even at his lowest point, Elvis was still capable of creating something beautiful and true. Billy Ray Tompkins, now in his 80s, still listens to those recordings every year on January 8th. People ask me what Elvis was really like, he says. I tell them he was a good man who got lost inside his own success, but who never stopped trying to find his way back. The story of Elvis's last birthday reminds us that fame and success, no matter how great, cannot protect us from the fundamental human need for connection, authenticity, and purpose. It shows us that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen not on grand stages in front of thousands of people, but in quiet rooms with old friends who remember who we were before the world told us who we should be. Elvis Presley died 7 months after that January afternoon, but the recordings he made with Billy Ray preserve something precious, the sound of a man who had lost himself finding his way back, however briefly, to the pure love of music that had defined his youth. They remind us that no matter how far we travel from our authentic selves, the way back is always there, waiting for us to remember who we were before we became who we thought we had to be. On January 8, 1977, Elvis Presley turned 42 years old. It was his last birthday, and it was also the day he remembered one final time what it meant to sing from the heart.